I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Emmy-nominated actor, the one and only Jake Lacy. Jake, mate, you completely nailed it as Robert Berchtold, the guy at the center of this true crime limited series, A Friend of the Family. So first up, what most surprised you about portraying this guy? Because I can't imagine it would have been easy.
The most surprising, I think, was Jan Broberg, whose story this really is as a producer and creatively involved in the production. And she had offered herself as, the most knowledgeable person of this entire case and experience, and offered herself as a resource to the cast. And I, in playing Berchtold, was really scared to reach out, thinking that somehow a closeness with her, or a friendship with her, a working relationship with her, was going to somehow muddy my trying to portray this person who did horrific things to her and to her family, and found the exact opposite to be true. That actually, having this friendship with her, and an understanding of her intention for this entire project, ended up kind of giving me a boost a few months into this, and felt like that aided in my intention and focus and drive to tell this story with compassion and hopefully some kind of honesty. So that was, beyond the material and the twists and turns of the story itself, but that was probably the most surprising thing, to go oh, I was wrong. I was totally wrong. Actually being tethered to this person in a meaningful way is helpful. It's not a barrier.
Right. And I mean, you could probably take that forward in future projects. If you're playing someone, problematic again, and you have the opportunity to reach out, maybe you might decide to do it again. I mean, it sounds really
good. And as a human being, having kind of spent, not to go full therapist couch situation, but just over time kind of building up this thing and going trusting my own counsel to a point of being you're not really reaching out. You're not really accessible in a way, out of fear for what that means. And really every time on set that I was kind of a spark, that wasn't some self-generated actory thing, came from really being present to what Leo is offering in a scene, or what Hendrix is offering in a scene, or what Anna or Colin or McKenna, really doing this work, and then finding a way to then turn outward and just be there with the other person, which is easy to forget and get away with a little bit in this career, in this craft,
Yeah, of course. And you're exposing yourself as well to, being vulnerable, and that's really not easy in any profession, let alone, when you're performing on screen, millions of people to judge you for. As the saying, it's hard. I can imagine it would be hard, and it's first world problems, but I get it. Truth is stranger than fiction, and I watched this not knowing anything about the story, and I couldn't believe that this happened. And then I started reading about it, and I saw the documentary. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. What were your reactions to when you first signed on and had to learn about what was actually going on back in the day with this family?
I had seen the documentary when it first came to Netflix, Abducted in Plain Sight. And then in getting these scripts and speaking with Nick and with Jan, came to understand that, not intentionally, but just by the nature of doing a 90-minute doc, you have to let some things fall to the wayside. And so then coming to understand pieces that weren't included in the documentary, and to understand really what it was like for the Brobergs and the Berchtolds, minus Robert Berchtold, what it was like for them to be in this hurricane, this tornado of paranoia and sorrow and fear and chaos, really, that he's kind of creating. So, and even then it's I know you spoke to Nick, but there's pieces that even we left out, and we told this story for 9 hours, and even that, there's some things that you had to go like, we should compress these moments, or maybe we need to do these 8 months in a montage. You know what I mean? Like, there's
Yeah.
still so much there, or things that story-wise you sort of simplify in order to move the story into the next piece, as opposed to like hammering every detail of the story. Yeah, I hope that's a
It does.
useful answer.
Yeah, it is. And when I'm watching you on screen and playing this guy, I wonder, like, men like B, how they manage to be so charismatic and weave a spell on their victims, but then not giving, like, so you're playing this guy who is manipulating and you're dominating on screen, but you're not giving too much away to the family in the show, and also to the audience, about what's going on in his head. And I imagine that would be a very difficult kind of line to walk. What was that like for you to because it's complicated. Like, it's even hard for me to put it into words, but you're not just a mustache twirling villain, right? There's a lot going on that we don't quite understand, and take some time to get there. That's difficult.
I think, a lot of it was some is, dictated by the script, and you sort of get a sense of the rhythm of a scene in which you go, oh, we're moving away from his public facade and persona and the sort of character he's putting on for these other people in his life. And then in this one moment, we're sort of pivoting into his internal experience and then coming back into the public. And so some of that's dictated by the script. And then on the day, working alongside Nick, whoever's directing that episode, and then our wonderful DP and camera operators, and kind of, coming to the table with an idea to go like, if we do this way, and then I turn here, can you still get my eyes if I come back? Like, just building that kind of stuff to sort of craft the public and private space. Or, I mean, there's a version of this story that maybe doesn't play well on camera in a way, but is that, like, you never see inside his thing. Like, he doesn't crack the whole time, and that wasn't useful to the version that we were telling, or the intention of it. But that very last piece in episode 9, where it's actual courtroom footage of Jan confronting Berchtold, and this is years after the abuse had stopped, but over those years, he's continued to like hound the Brobergs, claiming their stories are defamation, and he's going to sue them. And, and even then in court, he's saying like, well, I'm sorry, that's how you experienced it, Jan. I'm sorry for the hurt I've laid on you. As if this is like, I'm sorry you saw it that way. He's still either out of like preservation of not going to jail, or mental preservation of going like, I can't actually I don't have the ability to access a feeling of like shame and guilt and remorse and compassion. And like, I'm not wired that way, or whether I don't know, or delusion, but he still is like blocked off. But yes, it was like collaborative to figure out when and how to kind of lean away and lean into his view of the world, and then his masking that thing.
Yeah, that's difficult. That's really difficult. It could have gone so wrong. Like, it could have been just really one note. It could have been difficult for the audience to even kind of have a way in. And yet I was riveted. I think we watched this like in a few days, which is, I mean,
oh wow,
saying something. But
yeah.
So I get it. The other thing that I am interested about is that I've had actors tell me repeatedly that when they portray someone, real or not, they have to care about them, or they have to understand them, or I've even heard they have to love them. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that line of thinking when you're playing someone as irredeemable as B was.
I think, well, yeah. the he's a sociopath,
Yeah.
you know, and so there's an inorganic thing in him, you know, the way that like you or I would experience the world or move from one moment to the next.
Mm.
He's like a viper, you know, it just isn't, there isn't like a thing where you go, well, this guy's sort of violent to his family. Maybe, you know, I don't condone that. Maybe I can find a way to access the pain that he's experiencing that's coming out of, or his lack of tools for how to process these feelings about himself and the world. And how do I relate to that? And, you know, that at least is a thing in which you go like, oh, I can find something in there that's hurting that I can relate to and care for without saying like, oh, this is acceptable behavior, you
Yeah.
know?
Like something real. Yeah.
Right. And in this case, I think what I attached to more was more than finding a way maybe to like love him or have some kind of compassion for him was his like completely consuming self-obsession and narcissism.
Yeah.
You know, that he was like searching for this high, that this thing that he was obsessed with, little girls, was like the ultimate thing for him.
Yeah.
To get it and pursue it and have it and keep it a secret. And like I can find a thing in my life that isn't pedophilia that I also want to get like a charge from or want to get a buzz off of, that I can kind of supplant, you
Yeah.
know, without trying to go like, how do I convince myself pedophilia is acceptable?
Yeah.
You know, as an actor, how do I wrap my head around compassion for a predator? It's like, well, I don't have to do that. I can, if I assume he's on the hunt and is an egomaniac, you know, there's some of that in me in a way that's 4% of what a, you
Yeah.
know, clinical narcissist experiences.
Right.
And so
We
how do
all
I
have
like
that. Yeah.
rank into that? You know, how
Yeah.
do I like latch on and go, oh, I know what it is to chase a high, to chase a thing. Like, how do I, let's plug that in here, you know?
I love that. That is so fascinating because, yeah, I totally see that actually, the more I think about your performance. It brings me to this though. The reason why I ask is because actors also tell me a lot about how, you know, you're playing this insidious, hypnotic psycho, a sociopath. You preyed upon girls with horrifying consequences. And I hear if you're playing someone like that, you're always separating yourself, Jake Lacy, from Robert Berchtold, of course, but your body sometimes doesn't know the difference. And I hear that it can leave you quite wary, or like these subconscious scars on you at the end when all is said and done. And it's like a weight lifts off your shoulders. And I hear this from actors. I find that really fascinating because I have no idea how that feels. Do you feel that way? And did you feel that way when you were done and dusted with a friend of the family?
I think two things. One is you know, when we were making it, so much of my, you know, out of playing a person who's like a narcissist and in denial and you know, not mentally well, is like not seeking help for diagnosed manic depression. And you know, um the a lot of my story is within his blinders, you know.
Yeah.
Like I'm not seeing the fallout. I'm literally, Jake is not on set for
Yeah.
scenes in which Gail is hurting from what her husband is doing, you know. So I, along with Berchtold, got to live in this fantasy of like, I'm Steve McQueen, you know, was like a reference that we kind of built in there, you know, that he thinks he's like Danny Ocean pulling off a heist. And it's not until I saw the edit of that first episode where like my sort of freewheeling hey, I found the one love story, is cut against the sorrow and fear and paranoia of Gail and the Brobergs silently negotiating whether they should call the police or not, that I thought like, oh, that's exactly right. And also like, I feel really icky now, like it felt like I got to live in the sort of bubble of this hero story while we shot, and then stepping back and going like, oh, this is horrifying. That was more the case than being like, this left me, you know, dented and bruised in some way. But the other piece is like, I have two little kids, and I've always been very alert about like, let's meet these teachers, let's meet these coaches. Who are these people? Who are those people? What's the new person doing? What's their vibe? Like being very aware of the people in my kids' lives. And I feel more and more like a sort of claustrophobia, honestly, in like adults around my kids after doing this, like an increased thing of being like, get away. I don't know who any of you, I don't know what you do behind closed doors, like in a way that I felt my level was kind of amped already. And now I'm like, I think I need to find a way to like make peace with the world, because like just being involved in this kind of story, it just does plant the seeds of going like, you don't see it coming. That's the whole point. You don't know the predator's the predator. That's the whole game.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying as a parent,
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's it's that stealth. It's when you're least expecting it. We are all very vigilant. I have a 14-year-old daughter, 12-year-old son. I get it. I am like ridiculously helicoptery sometimes, but it's that moment you let your guard down. And that's what this show does. And what Nick did so beautifully, and you, of course, is that when you're on screen, you're like a matinee idol. He's so charming, and he's so adept at manipulation. And this family are so hopeless. Like you just feel like, what are they doing? But of course, we then start to learn that he had this hold on them too. Like the scene with you and Colin Hanks in the car. I mean, that must have been difficult. I know you did that over 2 separate nights, and then you've got scenes where you're gaslighting McKenna Grace, this character. Like that, they are even more. That it's what I'm trying to say is that was more disturbing to me than having to see actual scenes of rapes and so forth, which we don't see. We don't need to. And do you feel that was just as disturbing as parents having to see this matinee idol coming in and just destroying this family with his smile? It was horrifying.
Yeah. When Nick and I first spoke, I was like, how are you going to do this? And his like 2 key points where he was like, Jan is involved, like if she wasn't involved, I wouldn't be doing this, which put me at ease. And then the second thing is that he was like, we're not showing the abuse. Like, we're not going to hire an 18-year-old to play 14 so that we have consent to film, scenes of child abuse. Because he was like, I don't, as a human, want to put that into the world. As a producer, I don't want to ask a cast and crew to do that. And also, like, narratively, I want this to feel in the same way that the Brobergs felt like something's wrong and I don't know what is happening, and so that's how he wanted the audience to feel, was to be like, this is not right. I know there's something off here, and I've not seen it. I couldn't describe it to you other than I don't like how much time that guy spends over here. He has no boundaries. He keeps redefining what's okay and what's not in my own house. The story is essentially one person knocking you off kilter 2% at a time until over 3 years, you wind up in a place where you just don't know how you got there. And as Colin has phrased it, he's like, you wind up making choices that are against your best interests. How do you know this path is not going to help me, and yet I can't help but believe this will be the solution. Like, how do you wind up in that spot? And Berchtold, was a master manipulator, and also I think stumbled upon the exact circumstances of innocence, naivete, trust, this faith-based family, religious in a faith-based in forgiveness and compassion, and all the elements that he could then twist and pull and manipulate into creating space to get what he wanted, which was a sexual relationship with their daughter.
Yeah.
So it's horrifying.
Pretty much. And yet
long
so
story short,
compelling and riveting. Jake, mate, you followed up White Lotus with this. I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. Thank you so much for your time today.
Man, thank you so much. Real pleasure.